Welcome to Midnight Mule FPL. I'm Midnight Mule and this is the video for Game Week 19 for the 5% series, where we look at the popular players and the once popular players, and I suggest which ones are worth picking, the order to play them, and if you follow these instructions, then hopefully by the end of the season you'll finish in the top 5% globally, which means you should do alright in your mini leagues. You're not going to win the whole thing, but you'll hopefully do alright. And that's what it's about, just trying to do alright. We start by looking at how the players did last game week, which was game week 18. So for the keepers, Pickford 9, Sales 9, Raya 6, Henderson 7, and that's all. For the defenders, Saliba 7, Gabriel 6, Hall 6, Aina 6, Burn 6, and Aït-Nouri 6, and then that's all for the defenders. For the midfielders, Palmer 10, Gordon 10, Salah 9, Bowen 8, and then that's all for the midfielders. For the forwards, Kuna 12, Isak 8, Havertz 7. So there were no massive scorers in the system, and there were quite a few that got all right scores. So I think the average globally was 50 something. A lot of managers got between about 60 and maybe 70 or 80. So if you were somewhere in that ballpark, you probably did all right. We'll now look at the players in the system, starting with the goalkeepers. So these four keepers, Raya, Sanchez, Sales and Pickford, they're all pretty solid. None of them are going to massively hurt your rank. So Pickford and Sales, if they scored 6 points and you don't own them, it's like you get minus 0.8 points. Whereas Raya at the other end is minus 1.7 points if you got 6. So the goalkeepers, you kind of want a keeper that plays, and that's all right for now. If you ever have lots of transfers, you want to do something, or you're on a wild card, that's the time to probably change your keeper. But as long as your keeper plays, it's all right. You don't need to worry too much about the keepers. That said, any of these are good solid keepers to have. Any of them could get decent clean sheets. Sanchez is possibly the most dodgy on the screen at the moment. Any of them are all right though. Raya, if I had money wasn't an issue, I'd probably have Raya and just keep him for the season. But money is an issue. And I haven't got Raya at all. I've got two very cheap keepers. And then for the cheaper keepers, Henderson, owned by maybe 10% of managers around your rank. So if he got 6 points, that's like you get minus 0.6 points. He's growing in popularity because Palace have some nice fixtures coming up, starting with Southampton this game week. So Fabianski and Flecken both went off injured. The time they went off, they both had save points and they both had clean sheets. At time of recording, we don't know for sure if they're playing. I suspect neither are playing. So if these are your two keepers, there's a reasonable chance you have no keeper this week. If you can afford to get somebody from the previous page, I think you should do that. If you can't afford that, then probably sell Flecken to get Henderson is probably the way to go. And then the other keeper on this page that plays is Martinez. I was close to removing him because he's so lowly owned. However, I think in the next few game weeks, Villa may get quite a few clean sheets. And if they do, I think he may rise in popularity. He's a very good keeper, but Villa's defence isn't the best, which is why they've got hardly any clean sheets this week. And then Ward represents any 4 million keeper that you may have that's just sitting on your bench. So we'll now look at the defenders. The two most important are Gabriel and Trent, because these I think have the best potential for getting decent points, and they're moderately highly owned. But Trent's around maybe 20% owned around your rank, I think. Gabriel's more like getting closer to 50, but not quite. And then Saliba, he's not as highly owned, but he's the same price as Gabriel, but has probably a lower point potential. So people would rather have Gabriel than Saliba. A few managers have both, but not that many at all. Robinson, so more people actually own Robinson than Saliba, but Saliba is more important in the system because he's got more chance of getting points than Robinson. But Robinson is a very good defender. Then we have Aina and Hall. So if your 3 active defenders that you played every week were made up from the 6 you see on the screen, so you had any 3 of these, that would be all right. Preferably it should be Gabriel, Trent, and then one of the other ones. And then you could have like 2 bench fodder, and that should be fine. And for the less important defenders, Gvardiol, Virgil van Dijk and Pedro Porro are all around about the same ownership levels. So any of these you don't own, If they score 6 points and your defender gets 0 points, that's a swing against you of minus 0.8 points. Not too bad at all. Virgil van Dijk, 6.5 million. I wouldn't be buying him now because I'd rather use the money elsewhere. Gvardiol, 6 million. Pedro Porres, 5.5. Of these, personally, I think Gvardiol is the better defender. Certainly for the next 4 game weeks, has the best chance of getting decent returns. Then Mikolenko's just bench fodder. He's lowly owned. Burn used to be popular, but if you wanted a Newcastle defender particularly, you should really get Lewis Hall from the previous page. Mazrou's dropping a lot in popularity, and then Lewis is, because Man City have been so woeful, but the reason Gvardiol's more popular than Lewis, even though he's more expensive, is he gets lots of chances of attacking returns. He's just, I think, only got 1 goal in the last few weeks, Gvardiol. So the previous page is where you really want to be getting your 3 defenders from. But if you got some from this page, that's all right. And in this page are defenders that are really not going to hurt you now. So Konza from Villa, very lowly owned. Aït-Nouri, a lot of people dumped him after his red card. And then he managed to get a clean sheet. I think the last 2 games with the new manager, Wolves have now got clean sheets. Unlikely to get a clean sheet away to Spurs, but if they do, that'd be mightily impressive. So the next 4 games aren't great for Aït-Nouri, but we need to see how attacking he is, how he's playing. He may be fine to have, but 4.8 is quite expensive and you don't need to fear him. This whole system is based on which players do you need to fear. Try and own the players that you should be fearing. If you don't own them, Aït-Nouri is not going to hurt you. Howard Bellis is bench fodder, Grease is bench fodder, and he's only 3.9 million now. Taking Van der Berg out the system because he's so lowly owned and he's injured anyway. About face 4 million, just bench fodder. For the midfielders, Salah's pretty much 100% owned. Palmer's very highly owned. Not quite 100%, but nearly there. You really want to try and have these 2 players. If you don't have either of these players and they do well, that is going to hurt your rank. So with most managers not having Haaland and now Saka's out till March is the latest I've heard, there's no reason not to have these 2. Mbeumo's dropping in popularity. 7.6 I think is quite expensive for what he offers at the moment. The next 3 fixtures, Arsenal, Southampton, Man City, Liverpool. If I had him, I'd be comfortable selling him if I had something else I wanted to do with the money. Rodgers, he's only 5.4 million. So Rodgers and Mbeumo, if you don't own them, would do similar damage to you. But I think Rodgers has got probably slightly more potential. Rodgers is more feast or famine, I find. He would get over 10 points or else 2 points. That seems to be where he is. And most of the time he gets 2 points. But he's popular because he's so cheap. And then Gordon's moved onto this page. He is growing in popularity. Newcastle are doing very well at the moment. And I'm kind of expecting it may well be in the next 2 or 3 weeks, Gordon is going to be the 3rd most popular midfielder. The only other one that might get up there is Foden, who's not even in the system. But if Foden does well in the next several weeks, I think people will be piling in to buy him. But he's very expensive. For the slightly less important midfielders, Ahmad, he's nice and cheap. So he's not done so great recently. He's a very good player, but playing in a team that's not doing very well at the moment. I don't know if that manager is going to last to the end of the season. And he's a new manager as well. So home to Newcastle and away to Liverpool. May not get much there, if anything, because Newcastle are actually defending quite well at the moment. But then at home to Southampton and Brighton. Personally, I wouldn't be buying him now unless it was to release some money that I wanted elsewhere. But if you've got him, he's fine to have. Luis Diaz, very good player. Didn't play last game week, which means the reckoning is he's probably going to play next game week. Away to West Ham, could get some nice points. But because he's quite lowly owned and he's a minute's worry, I'd say it's not worth buying him at the moment. Enzo for Chelsea, solid player, only 5.1. So Fernandes, so he's banned for the next game week because he got 2 yellows, which makes a red. The United fixtures are good. Most managers seem to be dumping him and going elsewhere. So you want to decide this game week what you're going to do if you've got Fernandes. You either hold him for this week when he's not playing, and then you've got him for Liverpool, which he probably won't get anything, but he may do. Then he's got some nice fixtures. Or you sell him now and you just move on. So if you're selling him, I think Gordon from the previous page is quite a good option. He's doing well at the moment. He's going to grow in popularity and he's cheaper, so it releases cash. Obviously, if you've not got Salah or Palmer, you want to try and get them. But if you can afford to keep him, then he's fine to keep as long as you can get 11 players out this week. But most people are selling him, so he is going to go down in value. Bowen, nice and steady, ticks along. 2 points, 3 points, 5 points, 7 points. He's just a bit of a workhorse. He seems to score, gets a return rather, more often than not, so he's pretty much all right. But he's only 10%-ish owned around your rank, so you don't need to fear him. But if you've got him, that's fine. And then Semenyo was once popular. He's dropping in popularity. He's all right, nothing great. Personally, I wouldn't be buying him. And then the least important midfielders, Son, very good player, but very expensive, very lowly owned. If he does well, you don't need to worry about him. If he scores 6 points, you don't own him. It's like you get minus 0.3, which means if he got 20 points, it's like a -1. So if you've got him, he might get you some nice points. I would say he's not worth buying though, unless you particularly like Son. So Smith Rowe, massively dropping in popularity within the FPL community. He's not playing at the moment. He's flagged. He may not play next game week. He's not going to do any damage. So we're taking him out of the system. Same with Johnson. He's very lowly owned. And there's just better things to do with a midfield position. Dibbling, 4.5 million. Very good player. Bench fodder. You can use the money elsewhere. Winks, bench fodder really. 4.5 million. Garnacho, also taking out the system. He's 6.1 million. There's better things to do with the midfielder position and the money. Now, I am aware that the United fixtures coming up, he may start doing well and he may suddenly grow in popularity if he gets lots of points. But for now, I'm taking him out. For the forwards, Isak is now the most important forward in the game and he's the third most important player in the system after Salah and Palmer. So if you can possibly get him, you really should try and get him to protect your rank. Kuna's very, very good forward, but he's likely to get banned very soon. He's probably going to get the Spurs game. Reasonable chance of being banned before the Forest game. We don't know for sure he's going to get banned, but the expectation is he will get a ban. Is it 1 week, 3 weeks, 7 weeks? We don't know that at the moment. But he's still scoring points, so if you've got him, absolutely keep him and play him. If you don't have him, unless you're going to be wildcarding the week after, I'd say don't bother bringing him in. Jackson's a good player, quite popular, nowhere near as popular as Isak. So if Isak gets 6 points and you have a forward with 0 points, that's a minus 5.1 swing against you. Jackson's only a minus 2.1 swing against you if he gets 6 points. But the thing with Isak is he often scores more than 6 points. So that means he's going to hurt you more. If Isak gets 12 points, that's more than minus 10 points against you if you don't own him and your forward got 0 points. Chris Wood is a good player. He ticks along. He's a little bit like Bone in that he often gets a few points, but he's not guaranteed points every week. I wouldn't be bringing him in, and his ownership is such that you don't need to fear him if you don't have him. If you've got him, that's fine. If you don't have him, that's fine as well. And João Pedro, nice and cheap at 5.8. Should have got a red card last night. Sort of. He could have really hurt somebody. Tried to elbow them in the face, but he missed. So he didn't get in trouble for violent conduct, but it was attempted violent conduct. I don't know if anything's going to come of that after the game. I've not heard that it will. So he's not really got any points. The last 4 game weeks, he's not done anything special. And he's got away to Villa, then home to Arsenal. But he's only 5.8 million, so he's not taking up a lot of your money. I absolutely would not be buying him at the moment, though. And then the less important forwards, we have Solanke. He's not going to hurt you, 7.5 million. He could get some points, but there's no need to fear him. There are other forwards that are better to have. Havertz, he scored last night. He may gradually grow in popularity. He's definitely a good player. If you got him, well done. He might get you some nice points, but you don't need to fear him. Haaland is a good player. Man City have some nice fixtures coming up, but Man City are really dysfunctional at the moment. You don't need to fear Haaland at all. If you have a forward, say you had Solanke playing and you got 0 points, if Haaland got 6 points, that only hurts you by minus 0.2. If Haaland got 30 points, that only hurts you by -1. So you really don't need to fear Haaland. What a lot of managers are doing, getting rid of Haaland, spending the money elsewhere. But if you kept hold of him, fine, he might get you lots of points. Raul Jimenez, nice and cheap, 5.5. Watkins, some people online are talking about getting in Watkins. I really don't think it's worth it. Okay, he's a good player. He may get some points the next few game weeks, but he's lowly owned. He's not going to hurt you. I think there are better things to do with your money. But if you got him, fine, he's all right. Vardy, only 5.6 million. He's a good player, but he's getting on a bit. If you've got him, he's all right. If you're wildcarding, I'd suggest it's not worth getting him in at the moment. But he's kind of all right. We have 11 players, and I think you should be able to get... Well, we have 15 players, but it's 11 you play. I think you should have enough money where you can get 11 meaningful players out every week. Vardy probably wouldn't make my first 11, but he's all right. And then Cannon, Tom Cannon, represents any 4.5 million striker that you never play. He just sits on your bench. We're now going to look at the benching order, starting with the keepers. This is just my suggestion. There's logic behind it, but if you want to do something different, that's fine. So if the keeper's the first keeper you see that you've got, I suggest you put on your bench, which means you're playing your other keeper. So Ward or any 4 million keeper that's not even playing on your bench. Flecken possibly injured, Fabianski possibly injured, but they're playing Arsenal and Liverpool anyway, so probably not a clean sheet there. Martinez, Henderson, Sales, Pickford, Sanchez and Raya. And now for the other players, the first player you see that you've got, I suggest is position 3 on your bench, the next one position 2, the last one position 1. So Cannon represents any 4.5 million forward that doesn't even play. Fernandes is suspended. Winks, Faust, Howard Bellis, Greaves, Dibbling, Konza, Mikolenko, Byrne, Aina, Aitnouri, Mazraoui, Pedro Porro, Hall, Lewis, Robinson, Semenyo, Vardy. Then we have Raul Jimenez, Ahmad, Virgil van Dijk, Saliba, João Pedro, Enzo, Mbeumo, Bowen, Solanke, Wood, Rogers, Gvardiol, Trent, Gabriel, Gordon, Luis Diaz, Watkins, Havertz, Jackson. Regarding captaincy, Salah and Palmer are the two outstanding choices, and most of you will hopefully have those two. Now, online it's reckoned Palmer's got slightly more chance of getting more points, but I think Salah is going to be the most captained, which means he's the slightly safer choice. So for myself, I'm probably going to be captaining Salah, but they're both good choices. And if one does well and the other one doesn't, those who captained the right one are going to get a decent boost in their ranking probably. But if you want someone else, Son is an all right choice. Big gamble. The fact that you even own him is a big differential. If you captain him and he does well, that's even more points. They're playing Wolves this week. Isak's a good choice. Away to United. United are having real issues at the moment. Haaland, if you still got him, he's a very reasonable choice, as is Kuna. So any of these for your captain, any of these for your vice captain. If you fancy somebody else, then a midfielder or forward from the previous pages that I had flagged as green, they're all right as well. As for the background picture, every week I talk about Cannon from Leicester, Tom Cannon. He was in the system, but then he went off. He's on loan to Stoke. But it's his 21st birthday today. So I thought, given that I mention him every week, I'd have a little Cannon here for him. And there we have it. That's my thoughts on the players for Game Week 19. Now, I'm aware there's a lot of players that aren't in the system that seem quite popular. But I reckon at best, 20% of players that get hyped up stay good and are worth having. The majority of players that people online hype up are forgotten about in about a week or two. And I don't want to be cluttering up the system any more than it already is. There we have it. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a nice Game Week 19. Cheers. Bye.